Hello, everybody. Vince Venturella here. I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about something that's been going around a little bit, as though there's something in the water, and that is Mordheim. Anthony from the Sustainable Center made a video today talking about why Mordheim has endured. As I've said in previous videos, I'm a game designer by trade, and it's funny because Mordheim is actually, from a game design perspective, something I've been very interested in for a long time. I actually wrote like a short paper about it for a blog a while back, and I thought, hey, why not share that up? So I thought I'd take a minute and kind of walk through an examination of the game and what makes it so popular. So we're going to switch over to a screen share here, and I'm going to kind of show you what I think about Mordheim and why I think it's endured. All right, so to start out, let's talk about my history with Mordheim. I played Mordheim when it came out back in '99. I thought it was really cool. And I had already been playing Warhammer Fantasy for a while, and my friends and I, got the book when it came out. We all rolled up some warbands, and we were very excited. And admittedly, in that time, I was, we'll be nice and say, an idiot. But when I came back to it recently, I sort of discovered a much deeper love for it than I had had originally. And in thinking about it, it really made me think that this statement is true, that Mordheim is the accidental best game ever. And so what I want to kind of walk through with you today is the reasons why I think that's the case. So why is it so beloved? I'm going to walk through a bunch of different reasons, and this is just the first one. Anthony in the Sustainable Center's video kind of listed off some reasons. I think he's right on almost everything he says, and I think there's a lot more. So here's the first element of fun, and I'm going to talk about all these. I think all of these ideas are elements of fun that can occur in a game, and many games have some of them. But Mordheim somehow accidentally captured lightning in a bottle. It sort of, perhaps in spite of itself, put all of these things together and formed something very popular and very good that has endured for 15 years without any kind of support. So let's start with the first one. A wide and varied array of choices. Warbands, equipment, and styles of play. Even though the base book only had 6 warbands or so, or something like that, if you count all of the humans together as one. The reality is that very quickly, more warbands were published in the Town Crier magazines. There's even more online. The online community has really come forward and shared a lot of these over time. Equipment, again, same story. There was a pretty decent selection in the base book, but right away in Town Crier and the online community, you just see a ton of these. And as well, when it comes to the warbands, they manage to mimic, just as in fantasy, that there are many different styles of play. There are warbands that favor being more aggressive, warbands that favor melee or shooting, that do well in certain scenarios, take and hold versus go and get, and run off the board, If it's defending an obstacle or something, the dwarves, if they can start near it, are probably pretty good. If it's grab something and run away, the Skaven are pretty good, and the dwarves are pretty bad, and so on and so forth. So what that means is that the game stays interesting because there's always something else to try out, to explore. So the next item on my list for an element of fun is collection. It has an element of collection to it, i.e. you have to collect something to play this game. And I think that's important. I mean, people like collecting things. There's a reason why baseball cards have been around for 90 or 100 years. People like collecting things. We like having a collection. What's interesting about Mordheim is, like many skirmish games now, it fits into sort of this sweet spot where what you need to collect is small but varied. And you can, oftentimes, if you have an existing Warhammer army, you might be able to just use those existing figs. But, or you might go out and get a couple random figs from, maybe you get a couple bones and a couple things from Avatars of War and a couple Games Workshop figs. It doesn't matter. Because it's more freewheeling, you can kind of get away with whatever you want. There's a second layer here of terrain. If you're a person who likes terrain and buildings and stuff like that, you can build your terrain, you can buy terrain. I made a bunch of terrain out of cardboard that I then sprayed with concrete spray paint, and it was fun to make and cut out and stuff. The reality is there's a collection element to it, but not so overwhelming. Sometimes a lot of people perhaps can be overwhelmed by Warhammer if you have to collect 50 figs, 100 figs, 200 figs, more. This is generally in the 10 to 20 figs ratio. So it's a little easier. Next up, creation. Painting, assembling, expanding. Now in this case, I mean specifically the physical things being created, not your warband or something like that. We'll get to that later. So there's a hobbyist aspect to this, right? You assemble your miniatures, you get to paint them, you get to expand your warband as you hire more people, you get to expand out and try different warbands. Like I talked about in my IKEA effect video, the reality is that this sort of thing invests your sort of personal emotions into it. You feel the warband is yours and is valuable because you spent some amount of time on it. If you were buying pre-painted, pre-assembled figs, like a HeroClix style, you wouldn't have the same investment. Here, even if your warband's small and it didn't take a lot of work, you still feel like it's yours. Constrained resource challenge. So, Mark Rosewater, the head designer for Magic the Gathering, is very fond of a statement that restrictions breed creativity. And I think that's the case. Even in Warhammer and all these things, what makes it interesting is there's a constrained resource challenge, okay? When you have a Warhammer army and you have X number of points to build with, you cannot take everything in your book to the level you would want to take it at. You've got to choose which units go in, how many of each troop. The same thing is true here. When you buy your initial warband, you've got your 500 gold crowns or 600 if you're Marion Burgers, but you've got some monetary limit. You got to choose. Do I take all the heroes? Do I take, how many henchmen do I get? What equipment do I give them? There's a lot of different levers that are being pulled there. As well, what's different between Mordheim and Warhammer is that this constrained resource challenge continues throughout the game. As you lose people and they die or you want to expand, you have a very low gain on average of money or resources after each game. And as a result of that, there's always this constrained resource challenge throughout the process. You don't suddenly hit a point where life becomes easy, or at least it's very hard to. It can happen occasionally, but for the most part, you're sort of constantly struggling under a scenario of constrained resource challenge. Even when it comes to acquiring rare items, you can, it's on a roll of the dice. So even if you've got the cash, you may not get the item. Varying conditions. So in this, I'm talking about the actual play of the game. When you're playing the game, the conditions under which you're playing vary greatly. Now, this is something true in Warhammer as well. There can be scenarios, and they can be different, and the battlefields can be different. But the scenarios in Mordheim are, I find, far more impactful than the scenarios in Warhammer often. Maybe not always, but often. Because you very often do not need to kill the other warband to win. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Whereas in Warhammer, most of the scenarios, honestly, are kill the other army. In addition, the battlefield can vary so much more in Mordheim because of the level of terrain, right? Everybody knows the old 2 hills, two forests Warhammer table setup. In Mordheim, you've got buildings and fountains and bridges and levels and ladders and everything else. And game to game, it can change greatly. So the conditions you're operating under are very different game to game, and that means that your experience is going to be very different game to game. Operation under incomplete information. So this is a very interesting one because I think a lot of people don't sort of tend to think about this very much, but in Warhammer, the trend has been to give the player more information, which in a game like Warhammer, moving with as many moving parts as it has, that's a good thing. So for people who may have come to Warhammer recently, what you've got to understand is that in years past, all sorts of things were random that are sort of now measurable. So for example, firing a cannon is a thing you can do. You can call 10 from the back. Whereas previously you had to sort of look at it and guess and say, okay, I'll call 32 inches. As well with your charges, even though your charges are random dice rolls in Warhammer, it used to be, you charge double your movement, but you didn't get to pre-measure. You just had to be able to eyeball it and guess the charge, and that's how Mordheim works. You just got to eyeball it and hope you're in. So you sort of declare all your charges and then hope they get there. And that operation under incomplete information works a lot better on a small scale. In Warhammer, it was clunky, and I think it was the right choice to get rid of it because you're moving big blocks of troops and there's lots of different things going on, and it just ended up being clutter. But when you've got 10 or 12 models, it allows this game element to come in, and it is a very fun thing because you think you got the charge, but then it turns out you don't, or you think you could make this shot and then you can't. So there's all sorts of operation under incomplete information, which means you can screw up, or your opponent can screw up. The next one is what I'll call tactical play, narrative play. And Mordheim actually allows both very fluidly. In the individual game itself, it's a very tactical game. You make a lot of tactical decisions. At the same time, in a broader sense, Mordheim very easily allows a continuing campaign-style play where game to game to game, you can evolve this ongoing narrative. Now, certainly, as people like Mordheim have proved, you can have a narrative in a Warhammer game. But for some reason, a lot less people do it. And I think that's because it feels harder to connect, the story of these huge armies to a sort of ongoing narrative where the army is marching and fighting and marching and fighting and marching and fighting. Really creative people like Mordheim can do it, but it's hard for a lot of people. It's a lot easier when you're dealing with something like Mordheim, where you have 5 or 6 named heroes and you're in this ongoing struggle against death in this terrible, awful city. So it allows these ongoing campaigns and this sort of narrative play style very easily. Oh, there's more. All right, next up, technically number 8, but I messed up my numbering, so I guess we'll just have to deal with that. Extreme variation and the emotional roller coaster. So this is a fun one because it is very much a double-sided sword. Mordheim, because it's reliant on sort of very often single D6s, and successes and failures can be so big that it very easily creates this sort of emotional roller coaster feeling. I'll give you an easy example. You've got 6 guys lined up with bows. The first 5 and shoot and all miss at some hero that's going to come into your lines and smash up your stuff. And you're like, ugh, God, and you just feel terrible. Your dice turned against you, 5 rolls, 5 misses. What? It's just infuriating. And then you get that 6th die and you roll and you hit. And you roll a wound and you get a 6, which is a critical. And then you roll on the critical chart and it's a 5/6, which is ignore armor and +2 on the roll. And you roll that and you put the guy out of action. Or 2 wounds, ignore armor, and you put the guy out of action. And all of a sudden, some really tough, maybe multi-wound, heavy armored hero, because of one lucky bow shot, boom, is out of action and could be dead after the fight. And now you couldn't be happier. 10 seconds ago, you were in the depths of despair. 10 seconds later, you're on cloud 9. And that is what happens in really in every individual game. You ride this intense emotional roller coaster, and it's packed in so tight. Round to round, phase to phase, you can go through this crazy roller coaster. And it makes it so every game produces memorable moments, because that's what this does. If there's no emotional roller coaster, there's no extreme variation. If everything's very normalized and balanced, it's not memorable. You don't remember every day of your life that you woke up, kind of maybe had a decent breakfast, went to work, day was okay, nothing bad happened, you had a nice salad for lunch or something, you went home, watched some television, went to bed. That's not memorable. You had thousands of those days in your life, and you don't remember any of them. But the day that you got married or had your first child or, got a cancer diagnosis, God forbid, or something, I guarantee you remember those days, right? Emotion creates memory, and hence it is with the game too. All right, varied victory conditions. So this relates to something I was talking about earlier. The scenarios allow you to experience varied victory conditions. So you don't win just by killing your enemy, to put it more simply. Sometimes you've got to take something or hold something or run something off the board or uncover certain tokens or whatever. And sometimes you do have to murder all of the other guys. And that's fine too. But in addition, even in that, there's this second layer of this routing mechanic where the whole enemy force can just pick up and head off the table. And you could be down, because routing starts so soon in Mordheim, it happens at 25% loss, basically. You have to start route checking. You could be down to 3 guys left out of a 12-person warband and have gotten lucky on 4 or 5 route checks in a row. You finally kill the one guy in the enemy warband that puts them down to having lost 25%, and they blow their first roll. And all of a sudden, what was almost an assured defeat, boom, becomes a victory. Just like that. And so even when it is kill the other guy, the victory conditions of it are incredibly varied. Okay? Next up, serious consequences with possible upsides. The injury table of Mordheim is truly a masterpiece of game design, because it is mostly bad with a small amount of very bad, very, very bad, namely death and or really horrible injuries, or, and as well, with an also small amount of really good. Like if you went frenzied in this edition, it was pretty ridiculous, especially if you're a hero who's lucked his way into multiple attacks, and that's an option on the table. Not a common option. You got to roll a 24 and then get like a 4 through 6, but it can happen. You could get +1 experience. You could go fight in the pits, which happened to Anthony. If he would have won that, that's a significant windfall. You'll get as much out of winning the pit fight as you do often out of your warpstone search at the end of the game. So even when things are bad, i.e. your heroes go out of action, the consequences are real and can be permanent, and it colors the story and your experience. But sometimes, against all odds, it can still be good. So this relates back to that emotional roller coaster I just talked about, because you have the emotional roller coaster during the game, and then in this genius stroke, you have it after the game as well. The post-game of Mordheim, and Anthony touched on this, and I completely agree, the post-game of Mordheim is often just as exciting and interesting and telling for your warband's success or failure as the game itself. Sometimes even more so. So there's this whole tale on the game that something like that Warhammer itself and many other games don't have. Even if you're not playing in a big ongoing campaign, if you're just playing sort of a couple games back to back, it can really be a very interesting set of things that evolve out of this crazy injury chart. Okay? Not to mention the fact that beyond the injury chart, you also have the serious consequences and possible upsides on your loot. And that leads us to the next one, which is advancement over time. This is more post-game stuff. So this post-game is so layered because you have your experience and you have your advancements, right, that you're getting. And you have your injury rolls, and then you have your shopping, which itself also has randomness built into it. And that's why I say unique heroes and uncontrolled increases. As Anthony pointed out, you don't get to decide what your heroes become. You don't get to say, this is my melee smasher hero, I'm going to give him a bunch of strength and attacks. Not how it works. If that guy gets strength and attacks, cool. Now you get to choose your skills, assuming that they have access to it, so you can sort of push toward it. If you give the guy Mighty Blow and other things like that, you push him into the melee realm. But if he then wastes his time rolling a bunch of ballistic skill up and initiative up, yeah, well, that happened. So it leads to very unique heroes that sort of develop on their own. Notice that the heroes are shaped also by the previous thing, the injury chart. So they get shaped in bad ways and good ways that are very evocative. And it's all in this big, fat post-game tale that adds to the experience. So then there's the third piece, which is random, unique, and wildly varying benefits. And that's in the exploration and trading piece. Again, we're still in the post-game. You have not only the sort of roll for your Weirdstone, but when you get those doubles, triples, quadruples, quintuplets, and sextuplets, then the real craziness begins. As you do things like, as Anthony has pointed out, he ate a kid. But there is so much craziness in those tables, and they're so fun to explore and find and luck your way into. And the first time in Mordheim you luck your way into an artifact, it is an amazing experience. Whatever it is you get, you feel like you have just found the item of items. The Holy Grail has been delivered to you. And it's so funny because compare that to choosing a magic item in regular Warhammer. It's just some points you spend. It's nothing special. He's got this weapon. The character, he or she has this weapon. Who cares? But when you finally get that magic weapon in Warhammer, or sorry, in Mordheim, my goodness, it is the end of an immensely long journey, and it is such a special thing. Even getting sort of non-magical rare items can often be very challenging. When you're talking about rare 10, 11, 12 items, those are not easy grabs, and you can often go a couple games and not get those, even if you send every hero out after them. So the random, unique, and wildly varying benefits. And lastly, in the why is it so beloved, choose your own time commitment. Mordheim itself as an individual game is obviously a smaller time commitment than Warhammer. That is to say, a game of Mordheim takes less time. Now, if you're playing like a five-person Mordheim game, that's not true. It can often be just as equal. Which actually leads to one I didn't mention here, which is that Mordheim scales very easily to account for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players, something that Warhammer can do, but it's a little more challenging. So it allows you to, how many people are in the room? Great, all those people are playing. But you get to choose your own time commitment. How much you invest into this game, because if you've only got an hour, you play for an hour, great. But if you got all day, you can get 5, 6, 8 games in. I mean, I'm sure there are days where I've done 8 or 9 games of Mordheim in a day because I have no life, and there you go. So you get to sort of choose your level of investment, and that happens all throughout this list. How much of the narrative you tell, how much of an investment you make into the narrative of naming your characters, of evolving their story, etc. How much you spend time modeling them, painting them. It very easily lets you set your time commitment. All of these things come together to be lightning in a bottle, okay? But there are dark sides too. So Anthony at one point in his video said something about maybe I'm honeymooning. As Narenzaid said in the comments of the video, yes, you are. You are very much honeymooning. But that's okay. That's not a bad thing. What's bad about honeymooning? Honeymoons are great for obvious reasons that I won't go into here. But they're a good thing, and you should enjoy that early period in a game. I mean, if you started playing a game and didn't have a honeymoon period and thought it was crap, I would say you should probably stop playing that game. So it's good to enjoy it. But over time, there are proud nails that crop up. There are dark sides to some of these design choices. And so that leads us to this slide, which is the dark sides. The endless hunger. So much like the Skaven, the Black Hunger, such it is with Mordheim. Especially if you play a lot of games, I will tell you that what happens is you always want more. And the truly the weak point is the scenarios. The initial book just did not have enough scenarios. And if you play regularly, not in a sort of campaign fashion where you're setting up the exact scenarios, if you play a lot of games, I would have days where I'd play 3-4 games back to back to back and do that a couple days a week. You will burn those scenarios out. Like, oh, Weirdstone Hunt again. Okay, here we go. I roll the D3. Like, so I ended up building a book of 30-some scenarios that I took offline and from town criers and from the base book. And I'll tell you, we still got to a point where that wasn't enough. Okay, after maybe 5-6 months. More warbands. That's the next one to go. Because there are only so many warbands that are going to match your playstyle, and if as well, since warbands often tend to crash and burn in this game, you might not necessarily want to go back to them, especially if they crash and burn twice or something. And I have here cigarettes to heroin, because that's the difference between Mordheim and Warhammer. Mordheim is a cigarette. It's a quick thing, but you use a lot of them. And the addiction that forms is strong because you keep getting that little puff, that little hit. It's hard to break. It's easy to keep repeating. And after you're done, 20 minutes, an hour later, you can have another one. Heroin, it's a little different. When you're coming off that, you're pretty good. You don't go back to the heroin well right away that day. You're tired afterward almost, and that's a game of Warhammer. No support. This is probably a fairly obvious one. There's no official support for it. Now, what I'll say to my own thing here is that this game does have a very robust online community that produces a lot of great content. But to some degree, a lot of it is also unbalanced and pretty crazy content. If you have a good group of friends where you can work together and come to a consensus, this doesn't become a problem. You can develop your own content. I've made up probably 10 warbands in my time, and I wrote easily a dozen scenarios. But if you don't have that type of group and you want to stick to official content, well, there's no more coming. So you've got what you've got. Hard to scale. It is what it is. Mordheim is what it is. It is a small-scale skirmish game with these 8 to 20 models. That's what it is, and it will always be that game. It doesn't scale to include monsters or other things like, rat ogres, that sort of thing is the biggest thing you're gonna have on the table, and honestly, they suck pretty bad. Most of those big monsters are money traps. Don't take them; they are terrible, and they will die, and you will lose a lot of hard-earned cash and time. But I don't want to get into a tactics video. So there's no elevation. You can't say, well, what if I want to take this up to the next level? It doesn't scale up really well. Honestly, just like Warhammer doesn't really scale down past a point. Once you get down below like 1,000 points, Warhammer kind of falls apart. And so it is with Mordheim, that it's meant to work on this small scale. That's not a bad thing. It's designed well for that scale. It just means that it is what it is. The death spiral, or the impossible comeback. So one of the downsides to the swinginess and the emotional roller coaster and all this and the post-game randomness is that your warband can get into a death spiral. I guarantee you, if you play enough games of Mordheim, you will have warband's death spiral on you, where they start to go bad, you have heroes lose toughness, you have heroes die, and even if you try to bring them back, you're just circling the drain, and you get on this long, slow, torturous death. And either you shoot that horse and put it down, or it's going to get put down for you eventually, because it just becomes impossible to come back. And that can lead to a challenge if you're playing a sort of ongoing campaign where, and Anthony's dealing with this, and I'll be interested to see how he navigates these waters, where you have other warbands that are 10, 12 games ahead of you. Yes, you're getting this big experience bump in each game, but if you don't literally show up, push forward a couple henchmen to get murdered, and then voluntarily rout, you are just going to spend every game getting just absolutely raffle stomped and getting your teeth kicked far down your throat. because you just don't stand a chance against these more advanced warbands. Now, if you and your friends can sort of agree, if you're playing a more casual situation and your friends can just say, hey, we'll restart some warbands too, and we'll save these other ones for when you catch back up. Well, great, that's not a problem then. But if you're playing a more rigid campaign, it can be challenging. Finally, the darkest horse of all this, which is the best options. If you play Mordheim long enough, you will understand that there are simply best options. And sadly, there isn't a lot of disagreement on what those best options are. Much like the old game of Axis and Allies, where if you play it enough, over time, there are simply the correct moves on the first turn. So it is with Mordheim. It is best to try to have all of your heroes in your initial build. It is best to give your heroes, or sorry, give your warband as little equipment as you can and just pack on bodies to a point. If everybody's got clubs. If you're playing with, I'm assuming core rules on all this that they haven't, sort of messed with things when I'm saying what are my best. It doesn't matter. If you get in there and jack with the rules, you're just going to make new bests. It is best to just have a bunch of naked guys running around with clubs and daggers, basically, because armor really doesn't do anything, and all you need to do is multiply out attacks, because that gives you the best chance of putting people out of action. Sorry. It is best to always buy a rabbit's foot and then a lucky charm. Period. Those are your first two. I remember reading in a town crier a battle report with like the Priest of Sigmar warband, and it went through the person playing 2 games, and literally he bought, the person reporting it bought rabbit's feet for every hero, and then lucky charms for every hero, and then other equipment. And it was so sad to me that even in the sort of official content battle reports, as it were, these best options were surfacing. And it's because things like rabbit's feet let you defeat the serious injury chart. It is just the most important piece of gear you can ever have. And so once those best options become known, once that becomes a known quantity, you can get into the same situation you often get in Warhammer, where you're like, well, I really want to take those Ushabti or something because they're cool models, but I know they're just terrible in the game and they're going to let me down. And so it can be with warband choices, equipment choices, etc. Fortunately, it does take a little while to get there. So my advice to you would be, unless you're in a hyper-competitive Mordheim environment, just don't read on the internet and don't start the cycle of ultra-competitiveness. Just have fun and let it evolve naturally and organically, and you can sort of dodge this bullet for a while. So those are my thoughts on Mordheim. Go ahead and stop sharing there. So those are my thoughts on Mordheim. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found this to be, I don't know, informative or interesting or something, as I spend a lot of your day walking through various Mordheim items. But leave your thoughts below on your experience with Mordheim and what you think about what I said. Are there other reasons I missed? Are there other good things, bad things? Leave that below, and see you next time.